this webinar, so I'm going to try to cover as much as I can in the time we were given. So we're going to go through everything, and I'm going to go first. I'm going to go through PLCs and HMIs, then I'm going to hand it off to Terry for drives. At that point in time, once Terry finishes, then we can start to answer any questions that about stuff that you guys might be curious about that I haven't covered or that Terry hasn't covered. So first and foremost, we're going to start with our PLCs. One of the main points on the flyer that we sent out to everybody was uploading from S7-1200s and S7-1500s. So we're dealing with an Ethernet connection. To the left of me, you can't see it here, but I have an S7-1200, I have an S7-1500, and I have a KTP-400 basic comfort panel. So whenever you're trying to connect to a device initially, you're going to always want to make sure that your computer is set up so that it's in the same so that's in the same subnet as every other device that you're connecting to. So usually, depending on what version of Windows you're using, you're going to want to go to your network and internet settings. And then you're going to want to go to your Ethernet connection because we're connecting to these devices over Ethernet. This is my connection here, and it says it's an unidentified network. I already know what subnet my devices are going to be in, and we're using IPv4. For those of you who don't know, that's often the protocol that we're going to be working with. I already know that my devices are in the 192.168.1 subnet, so all I have to do is make sure that my computer occupies a unique node within that subnet. So I did that, like I said, for my network settings, my network and internet settings. Came here to properties, went to Internet Protocol version 4, went to properties, and then from here, you can either use a fixed IP address, which if you know your subnet, then this is probably what you should use. But there's also the option to obtain an IP address automatically using DHCP. Essentially, your computer will dynamically change its IP address if you were to choose this option based on the devices you're trying to connect to. So since I'm already set up, we're going to open up Portal. I'm running a virtual machine and I'm going to use version 15.1 just because of the hardware that I'm using. When you first open Portal, you don't come to this screen. This is the project view. You start in the Portal view. And typically here, you'd be able to open up an older project that you have, create a new project, or migrate a project of an older version. I'm not going to do that just yet. I am going to open a new project at some point and then upload my S7-1200 program and my S7-1500 program in. But first, I want to show you that if you open up the project view, over here in the project tree, you have this little checkbox or this little box that you can expand called Online Access. Essentially, this shows all of the cards that are attached to your computer's motherboard. And in this case, this is my Ethernet connection. So I'm going to open this and update my accessible devices. This is a way for you to search your network that you're currently connected to and to see what devices are currently occupying it. So you'll see here, if I hadn't had these devices already up as accessible devices, they would populate here, and then you can see their appropriate IP addresses, as well as the Profinet device name, which is before the IP address. So you can see my host computer. This is the HMI I'm working with. This is the S7-1500, and this is the S7-1200. So if you weren't in the same subnet of these devices initially, you would only have the option when you expand one of the devices to go with online and diagnostics. From the online and diagnostics window of any of these devices, you have the option, if I open this, these are password protected devices, and I figured that'd be a good example to show because I'm assuming some of you might have password protected devices. So I'll put in the password, and once I click enter, you'll notice that this PLC not only shows its online and diagnostics, but also shows its program blocks, its technology objects, and PLC data types. If I weren't in the same subnet already, I would only have the option to go to online and diagnostics. And from here, if you weren't in the same subnet and you wanted to change the subnet of or you wanted to change the IP address of your device that you're working with so that it is in the same subnet, from the online and diagnostics page here, you have a bunch of different options. You can assign your IP address, you can set the time, you can do any firmware updates without even having a project open. So it's a very useful tool to have. We're already in the same subnet as these devices, so I'm not going to change anything. I just wanted to show you that this is a feasible option and it does exist, even if you don't have a project with you right now. So we want to take these devices that are existing on our network and we want to pull them into a brand new project. So I'm going to come up here to project, create a new one. I'll just call it main. excuse the capital A. Once the project is created, you'll see that we have no devices currently in it. But if we came back down here under online access, we know that all these devices exist on our network. So a quick and easy way of just grabbing one of these devices, once you know they're here, and uploading them into your project is to do something called upload devices and new station. So you want to highlight the device that you see as accessible. You want to come up here into online, and you want to upload devices new station. So this is good for a situation where you don't have the original project, you just created a new project and you're on the network of your PLC, and you just want to upload the device, all of its local IO, all of its tags, all of its program blocks, etc. So we are going to start the upload. This may take a second. So we see that it started the upload from the device. Now it's going through the process of pulling it into the project. And you'll see now that I have a PLC in my project. And this is not something that I had a pre-existing project for. This is something that was just out in the field. You'll see I have all the blocks. I have my tags. If I were to open this, I have my tag table now. And I also have my data types, as well as other associated information that's important and imperative to the project. To prove that what I just uploaded from the device matches what's online, I can go online with the device now, and it's password protected, so I'm going to type my password. And now I see that I am green checked. Everything I have in my project now matches what's online with my PLC, which tells me that I successfully uploaded from the device with no issues. That was our S7-1200. We're going to do the same thing with the S7-1500 because
Corey,
why
can
not?
I interrupt real quick?
Absolutely.
So since you have password protection on these, it looks like it restricts you from going online with the PLC unless you have the password. If you didn't have the password, could you still upload and download to, say, download to a failed PLC or download to a new PLC and replicate the old one?
If it's password protected, then no. You're going to need to have the password. In those situations, you'd have to reach out to your OEM or the manufacturer that sent you the machine and try to reason with them to either send you the original project or to give you the password.
Right.
I just wanted to show that in the case that someone did get a password and they didn't know what to do. But that's a good question, Terry. No, if it's password protected, then you're kind of stuck in a weird situation. If the PLC has a memory card in it, then there's ways of obtaining the project through the memory card. But other than that, you need to reach out to the OEM. So I'm going to do the same thing with my S7-1500. It's also password protected, so it's going to prompt me to input that in a second. At least it should. Okay, so it didn't prompt me to do that. I'm assuming maybe it's because I already typed it in earlier. But the same situation, you have all of your blocks, you have all of your tags, and you also have your data types. So that's how you would essentially upload from a PLC that exists in the field. So with the older stuff, when you uploaded from PLCs, you lost your comments, you lost your symbols or tag names, and you lost your symbol tables. In TI Portal, you do not lose those. They are all residing inside the PLC. So no need to fear if you lose the original program and it's not password protected. You will have a way of uploading it and not losing all of your tags and your comments, which is a big difference because the old PLCs, you'd lose all that and it would make it very hard to try to figure out the program. So let's say you have a customer or someone you're working with has a PLC out in the field. They don't have TI Portal. However, they want to take a memory card, turn off the PLC, put the memory card in the PLC, and flash download the program to that PLC. Well, there's a functionality where you can mount a virtual drive to your computer. I'm going to do it here down the bottom. It's called card reader under USB memory. It's going to ask you to select a location for where you want this to create a folder. And in this case, I'm going to make a new folder called memory card. And I'm going to select that folder. So now we have a card reader that's virtually mounted to our desktop at this location. What we can do is we can highlight one of our devices, whether it be an S7-1500 or an S7-1200, and then we can go to Project, Memory Card, Oh, I'm sorry, card reader USB memory. And why is it not letting me do that? I got to open this. Interesting. Okay. Hold up a second.
I love it when this happens.
I know. I just did it like a second ago. So
Is it because you haven't saved your project or compiled or something like? Oh, you're online, dummy.
Oh yeah. Thanks. I need someone here for a sanity check. Thank God you're here. All right, so the idea behind this, like I said, is if you have your program in your TI portal and someone out in the field has a PLC that needs the program, but they don't have it, all they have is a memory card, then what you want to do is you want to highlight the device that you want to download, and in this case, we'll use the S7-1200. We highlight the S7-1200, go to Project, Card Reader, USB memory, write to memory card, and it's going to ask us to point towards one of the drives that we virtually mounted. In this case, I'll use the one example that I had created, and we're going to click the check. And it's going to prompt you to download as if you're connected to the actual PLC, but you're not in this situation. You're actually downloading to a virtual drive in a folder. And that way, when you finish the download, you can send this file to the person that has the memory card out in the field. They have to move that file onto the memory card, and then they could put the memory card in the PLC and turn it on, and it'll download the project to the device. And this is very helpful because sometimes if you're an OEM, your customer is not going to have licensing for Portal. There's another thing that we can talk about later on that is another alternative to this, but I just wanted to show you that that is a feasible option. And if I go to my desktop here, you'll see that it saved the contents of that project to this folder in the format that's needed for a memory card. So this is a different format than what a normal project file would be for TI Portal. So that's that. All right. So we showed you how to upload a S7-1200 and S7-1500, and we also showed you how to download to a virtual memory card so that you can send it to someone out in the field. Now we're going to talk a little bit about HMIs. And there's a whole bunch of options here with your HMIs. I'll touch a little bit more on the PLCs at the end when I talk about something called the Simatic automation tool. You'll see what I mean in a little bit, but for now we're going to move over to the HMIs. So let me pull this up. Okay, so with our comfort panels, which is the device I'm using today, you have three different options for memory. You have your internal memory, and as you can see there, it stores your operating system, project file, license keys, user admin stuff, etc. Almost all the information that's relevant to your HMI project. On the comfort panels, there's also two other slots. One is a memory card slot. If you see here, it just kind of says data on the comfort panel. This is used for logs, data logging backups, user data, and other recipes. This SD card can be any SD card. It does not need to be a Siemens SD card. And you also have the system memory card. This is the one we're going to be talking about today because this is imperative to backing up your HMI project. You'll see, like it says here, all the data from the internal memory is copied to this card. So if you have the reason this is so important, I should preface this, is that with Siemens HMIs, you cannot just go into the project like I had done here and upload it. It doesn't work for our HMIs. So this is why this is so important, because if you have a panel that say you don't have the project for anymore and it dies, there's no memory card in it, then you're kind of stuck in the sand. You have no way of retrieving that project really, especially if the panel's shot, and you'd have to essentially recreate it. So I'm going to show you a few different options here to back up and restore your device. First and foremost, we're going to start with the backup and restore functionality that's automatically built into the panel. So just to reiterate, you have internal memory, you have a memory card, which is just the data slot. This is for random information that you're going to be saving to a file on your HMI. And then you also have the system memory card. This is the important one. This needs to be a Siemens SD card. And there's some parameters that it needs to satisfy in order for it to work. So you'll see here, you need to have a Simatic memory card that's greater than or equal to 2 gigabytes to even perform the functions we're about to show you. So I was going to originally show this live. However, the process of doing the backup takes some time, so it made a little bit more sense to just kind of show the screenshots. To be able to access this menu, you're going to need to be able to exit the runtime of the panel that you're working with. So usually your runtime's up and running, you have your displays, your operator interfaces up and running. You'll need to exit the operator interface by exiting the runtime. And I'll show you, I don't know how easily you guys can see this. This is a panel, I'm running a KTP 400 Comfort. And this would be your interface if you had a bunch of buttons or readout displays or whatever. You'll notice over here, there's a little button to exit the runtime. And depending on your setup, it may be buried behind some screens, password protected, etc. We're going to exit the runtime, and you'll see it'll pull you to this window here. From here, you can click on settings, and I'll do that for you. It's going to pull you into almost like a control panel for your HMI. It's just very similar to what you would have for your control panel on your Windows 10 computer. I seem to have lost my camera for some reason. Essentially, when you pull that up, there's an option to click on something called service and commissioning, which is where you're going to need to go to do this. Essentially, under this, you can come to a portion called automatic backup. Now, this is important if you have a panel that's out there and you just want to make sure that your panel is constantly saving its project to this memory card so that in the case of failure, you have it backed up. You'll see here that needs to be a Simatic HMI memory card greater than or equal to 2 gigabytes. Essentially, you would come to the screen, go to automatic backup, and you'll see that there's two options here. If you do not wish to permanently back up the data of HMI device that's memory card, you can disable the automatic backup. So if it's disabled, then you're going to want to enable it. And when you do enable it, you'll have this option here that shows you whether or not there is a system memory card associated with. Essentially, it's saying there's a Simatic memory
Corey,
card.
are we supposed to be looking at your PC now? Because we're looking at you.
Oh, really? You don't see my screen?
I see your screen, Corey.
You see it now?
Yeah. I see the slideshow as well.
Oh, okay. All right. We're good.
Okay, sorry about that. Basically, if you were to come here to automatic backup and you were to enable it, if you plug in a Simatic memory card into your system data slot, it's going to prompt you to confirm whether or not you want to use this as an automatic backup. So if I were to plug it in, you'd see the icon on the left that says activate the project and licenses on the system card. It's going to ask you if you want to use this card you just plugged in as the automatic backup. And then from there, it would run you through a wizard to set up that memory card as a backup. That way your panel is just, every so often cyclically writing to this memory card to make sure that everything's backed up the way it needs to be. So if that's not the route you want to go and you're just looking to merely back up the panel to a memory card and then remove it, there are a couple different options here. You can go through the same interface that I had just shown you, and there's an option to backup and restore, which I'll show you in a second. There's also two other options. There's a software called ProSave that's free to use, which is another helpful way of backing up the project and then being able to restore it, as well as to perform some other functions like firmware updates, etc. I'll show you how to use ProSave. I'm also going to show you how to use Simatic Automation Tool to achieve the same thing I'm about to do now. Basically, under those same settings, under the service and commissioning window, I went too far. You have the option to backup, and you'll see here it even tells you what you're going to back up. You would come to this window, you would click next, and from here, you don't just need you don't just have to, you can use really any device that's pluggable into the panel. So in this case, I have an SD card and I have a USB stick. So you can use either in this instance for a backup and restore. These are actual photos that I took today of the device I'm using, and I have a memory card and I have a USB stick plugged in. I can select either one of these, and then once I select them, I can click next and it'll start to perform the backup. And you'll see that once you do that, you've backed up successfully to whatever device you choose. The process for restoring is almost the same. You tab over to your restore page, you select the device that your backup file's on, and then you select it and restore it. And that's going to transfer all the data over to your panel. Now, the important thing to note here is that when you do something like this with backup and restore, whether it be through the interface that I'm showing you here, through ProSave or the Simatic automation tool, if the device you're trying to restore onto needs to match part number and firmware, otherwise it will not work correctly. So if you get stuck in an instance and your panel dies, but you have a backup, you're going to need to replace it with the same exact part number HMI, and it should be the same firmware version as well. So this is how you would do it through the actual operator screen. There are other ways of doing this. If you're not able to reach this screen for some reason, maybe the programmer blocked you out of getting back to the operator system. So I'm going to use ProSave in this case. So I'm going to pull up ProSave, and this is free to download. You can download this from Siemens Industry Support site. If any of you need a link to it, just please feel free to email me. We'll give you our emails at the end. You'll come in here and you'll come and select the device you're using. So we're using a KTP400 Comfort. We're going to use Profinet. You'll see if the device supports other forms of communication, then you can use those as well. You could use USB, you could use standard Ethernet, and you can use MPI or Profibus, which is a serial connection. So in this case, I'm going to use Profinet because that's the way to go nowadays. You're going to need to know the IP address of the device you're looking at, because it's going to search for that IP address and then it's going to start just pulling the information. So I know what my IP address is, and it's not that, it is definitely 3. I come over here to backup, and I have the option to back up all the device, the operating system, the project files, etc. Or I can choose to use to get the recipes or the user admin. It really depends on the situation. From here, you can choose where you're going to save that backup, and then once that happens, you can just start the backup. I already created this specific file yesterday, but I'm going to overwrite it. So it's going to establish a connection to the device, and then once it establishes the connection, it's going to start creating the backup, pulling all the information from your panel, and you'll actually see on the HMI that you're connected to that there is a little bar that says it's transferring. That's how you know the backup is actually being performed. And it's going to take a little bit, so I'm not going to sit here and show you this. It'll take a couple minutes or so. However, you know that it's working. You can see that it's clearly communicating with the device when I just showed you the transfer screen. When the backup completes, it's going to save that backup to that location that you specified, and then from there, you can come back and do the inverse and restore it. You know, if you had a device that failed and you need to replace it. So that's the second way of doing the backup and restore. There's a third way of doing it. So Siemens definitely gives you plenty of options to make sure that you're covered on all bases. There's something called the Simatic automation tool. Let me pull up my PowerPoint real quick. Seem to be locked out of my PowerPoint here. There it is. I think it's because of the backup. I need to pull up this. So Simatic automation tool as of version 4. Originally this was a free tool to use. However, now it has changed over to a paid tool, and you'll see that there are basic, advanced licensing, and you can see here that the advanced features cover this scope of options and functionality. Basic includes everything else, like changing IP addresses, scanning for devices, backing up recipes, data logs, or user administration, so on and so forth. There's a whole bunch of stuff built into Automation Tool. When you download it, though, it's a free 21-day trial, so it gives you the option to download it in a pinch and use it for the first 21 days to get you out of the situation. I'm going to open Simatic Automation Tool. So when you open Simatic Automation Tool, it's going to look like this. It's a pretty basic interface. Essentially, we're going to come in here and we want to see the devices that we have on our network. So I'm going to scan, and you'll notice that a lot of the symbols here match what's in Portal. So if you're familiar with Portal, then you'll have a familiarity with the Simatic Automation Tool. So you'll see that it saw a bunch of devices that I have out in the field. It shows you the IP address, the MAC address, the part number, subnet, a whole bunch of information. I want to show CPU diagnostics. Oops. So So I told you that you can perform the backup and restore from either the operator panel, ProSave. I'll also do it from this interface as well, just to show you that it is possible within the automation tool. I'm not sure. I'm sure it'll give me some issues because this is still running, so I'm going to cancel this. I'll show you the process to create the backup, just so we can go over it. So you'd want to select the device. You're not going to be able to just do a backup and restore from a PLC because it doesn't apply to that. It's going to only work for your panels. So you want to select the device you're working with. In this case, we have the panel that we know that we're going to want to back up. We want to come down to operations, backup and restore. And we want to backup device to a file. So this is the third way of achieving the what I've showed you in the last two options. So click the continue to backup selected device. If the device requires a mode change, it'll place in stop mode. Do you want to continue? Yes, it's fine. And it's going to perform the same exact backup that ProSave had just done, as well as the interface in the operator panel. With the automation tool, while we're here, I may as well talk about it. It's not going to let me really do much while it's performing the backup, but needless to say, you can go online with your devices and you can pull up the diagnostic buffer for either of the devices. So if you're familiar with Portal, like I had shown you earlier, if you were to go to your online diagnostics for a device and you're online, you would have the option to see your diagnostic status, your diagnostic buffer, which is usually very important for telling you if there's a system fault, what is the problem and where. And that's one way of doing it in Portal. The reason I'm showing you this is because that is also a functionality with inside the Simatic automation tool. It's just a little bit more stripped down because you're not inside the actual project file. So from here, you can actually select S7-1200 and S7-1500, and you can actually pull up that diagnostic buffer as well. So if you needed a quick readout for an alarm that's going off, then you can do that as well from this automation tool. You can do a whole bunch of other stuff here as well, like setting profinet names, updating programs on your devices, performing firmware updates, etc. Because this backup is happening, I'm not going to be able to go through each one of those, and we're also limited on time, so I'm not going to be able to cover everything. But I just wanted to make mention of it because it is an option that I think most people do not realize is available. May as well made it known. If you have any other questions about the Simatic automation tool, just please feel free to reach out to me and I can address those. That being said, we're already at 30 minutes, which feels like it went by in the snap of a finger. I'm going to hand it over to Terry because he still has drive stuff that he wants to cover. So if you have any other questions about PLCs or HMIs, device maintenance, or backup at the end of the webinar, just please let me know and we'll address the question then. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so Terry can take over.
All right, and I think I'll be relatively quick. Come on. All right. So we should have a decent amount of time for questions at the end. All right. So just like Corey said, let's see. All right. I already set up my PC to be in the same subnet. Can everyone see TIA portal? Corey, you see that?
Yep.
Okay. And just like before, we can just drop down. Oh, I did create a project, right? That sort of is a prerequisite for uploading. So I've already got an existing project loaded up. Well, a new project loaded up. And then click on the online access. Here I'm actually on V16 in my host machine. And I know in V16, it's a slightly different interface for some of this stuff. But you can see here, I have my ACI, Applied Controls Inc. G120 demo, as well as the ACI S120 demo. So let's start with the G drives. Just like Corey showed, since I'm on the same subnet, I see both online diagnostics as well as parameter and commissioning interfaces. In this case, oh, excuse me. I'm just going to right click on the drive in online access, and here I have the option for upload device as new station right there. So I'm going to click that and let it do its thing. And here it's telling me that, you know, a couple of things differ from online, offline. Well, there's nothing offline at all yet, so it's kind of obvious. But just check the box for upload and click the button, and it's going to pull in hardware configuration. All right. And just to be safe, what I always do personally is, now you can see that drive is in my project tree. When I click on that, it does allow me to, highlight these buttons here, click on the up arrow for upload from device to ensure that we get the full parameterization as well. Okay, and now this drive is in my project, save my project, and I've got that drive backed up. If this fails down the road, all I need to do is swap out the physical hardware, connect up to it in Portal, and download. If there is a firmware mismatch, I can either change the firmware definition within Portal, change device, and I would go into this tree and select the appropriate firmware for my new hardware, change that over, and then I could be able to download without any issues. Typically, it'll still allow you to download with a slight firmware difference. So that's usually not too much of a hurdle anyway. But or in a rare instance, I could possibly want to maintain the old firmware. I don't know if we have time to go into that, but it is doable. You can always downgrade firmware if needed. Now I'm going to do the same with my S120 demo unit. Right click on that folder and upload device as new station. Okay, just a couple notifications. Click the button, and away we go. Okay, now that's in my network overview. Oh, that's the S120. And again, I'm going to highlight it in my project tree and upload just to ensure that I get the full device parameterization. Okay, and that's those components backed up into TIA Portal. Relatively painless most of the time. If you do have issues, it's usually because of your subnet and that kind of stuff. Next thing I want to talk about is flash cards, SD cards, excuse me. So in the drive itself, for a G drive, I'm going to bring up the G120 operating manual. And here it goes through the steps of how to back up your drive using an SD card. So essentially, if I've got a parameterized drive, what you're going to want to do is leave the drive powered on and then insert a memory card. And the reason that we're going to do it in that order is because when there's a memory card inserted into a drive and it powers up and sees that card, the default is to boot from that card. So if you have a parameterized drive, turn it off, stick a card into it, and that card actually happens to have a parameter set on it already. In my line of, in my experience, cards get reused a lot, so that's certainly a possibility. When that drive powers on and sees there's a parameter set on the card, it's going to then pull that parameter set from the card, wiping out your old parameter set, assuming that, it's the same hardware and that kind of stuff. So to play it safe, keep the drive on, insert the SD card while it's on, and there are then a number of ways to back that up. You can go into TIA Portal and your commissioning section, back up and reset, and there's a section that says save data to the memory card. I can also use the BOP if I'm, don't have access to Portal at the moment, right? If I'm sort of on the plant level, popping cards into devices, usually it's a lot easier to just use the operator panel to then say, hey, take your parameters and load it to that card. So extras, 2 card, parameter set, hit OK, and it's going to say saving parameters and then tell you it's done. And likewise, I can also do it through the IOP. It's just in extras, upload, download, and then right here, drive to memory card. So now once you perform that function, saving those parameters to the memory card, you can then leave that card inside the drive, and it can just live there for the remainder of its life. If the drive fails, you know exactly where the card is. It's right there, right? So the only case where, that it's likely for that card to fail as well is if you're in a corrosive environment or something like that. Obviously, you're going to know that and, store that card somewhere else. But my recommendation is to just leave that card in the drive. Since you put the parameters on the card, it is going to automatically boot from that card next time you turn it on, but you know that those two are the same. The plus side is if anyone fat fingers a parameter on the drive trying to, just change a speed setting or something, and they actually accidentally change a parameter, unless they manually save it to the card, then all they have to do is power cycle and you're back to where you started. So I think that's a benefit and a good way to go. As far as the S120 drives are concerned with respect to cards, the entirety of the firmware, the program lives on that compact flash cards. The compact flash cards, those are the bigger cards, about 1.5 inches square. So if the S120 control unit fails, it's always backed up. It lives right on that card. And all you need to do is swap out the actual control unit, pop in your old card. Like I said, the firmware lives on that card, all the device parameterization. So that pretty much takes care of itself. I'm not sure if we want to go into the trace tool or if we want to just open it up to questions now. I think we should do some questions since we're, running short on time. So let's open this up to the floor. Would anyone want to chime in first?
I guess we just did a really good job of explaining everything.
Yeah.
You did a great job of explaining everything.
Thank you, Mike. Honestly, though, if you guys anything related to the topics we talked about today, we'd be happy to address those questions while we're here on the phone with you guys.
Hey, Corey, just Ricardo, just quickly, I missed it on the Siemens automation tool for backing up. Was that launched from TIA Portal, or was that a standalone software like the ProSave?
Simatic automation tool is a standalone software that is different and separate from TI Portal. So you can download that for free off the website. However, now it's a licensed product, so you only have 21 days as a free trial, and then from there you have to purchase the basic licensing for IP address changing, firmware updating, backing up and restoring, etc. And I don't think it's a lot. I don't want to throw a ballpark a number out there, but if I had to guess, it's not expensive. Like it's not expensive at all. But yes, that is a separate software package, which is especially helpful if you're not trying to purchase full licensing, because licensing for 1200 versus and the 1500, they get expensive. Whereas the automation tool, you have the option to work with all the maintenance functionalities without having to purchase tiered licensing, if that makes sense.
Right, especially if you want to get all your maintenance laptops to have that software on it, right? You don't want to pay for, or have to deal with all that licensing for, TA Portal, swapping it around, getting it on the right PC or that kind of thing. The automation tool is a lot less costly. So it's not too much of a crazy proposal to just get one license per laptop.
Okay, so when you're talking about licensing, you're talking about licensing per laptop, not licensing per controller. I mean, you sound like you said licensing for 1,200, license for 1,500, and that's
No, the basic automation tool can do, IP change, basic backup and restore for any of the devices.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay, I
1,200, 1,500 series.
Okay, thanks.
Here, while we're here, I guess I'll show you what I was talking about the diagnostics functionality here in the Simatic automation tool. Let me pull this up. Sorry, I've got like 20 windows open. All right, so here's all my devices. And this is what I meant by that, Carter. If you were to use TI Portal to work with maintaining or looking at your PLCs, to work with the S7-1200, you would need Step 7 basic licensing. If you would work with the 1500, you would need Step 7 professional licensing. With the automation tool, you have the option to do all of the maintenance functionality without having to purchase 2 separate license levels. You can just purchase the basic licensing for the Simatic automation tool, which is like a couple hundred bucks or something like that. And then from there, you'd be able to perform all the functionality, all the basic functionality that most people would need. So like, for example, if I were to click on this S7-1500 and I know it's password protected, so I put in the password and enter it. Now I'm online with this device, hence the green box. And from here, I can see the display. I can see what devices are on the rack. I can come up here and open up the CPU diagnostics, which right here, and you'll see this is essentially the diagnostic buffer extracted from TI Portal and just kind of put here. So if you had any errors that you were trying to quickly look at, then you can pull up this diagnostic buffer and start to look at what the message would be. And usually there's an error code associated with the message, which would help you allude to the appropriate fix for that problem. That's just one example. You can come in here and you can hard code in the IP address, new subnet, new gateway. And then if you come up here and click operations, where is it? So I don't get to use this all the time. Set IP address, whatever new IP address that I were to push into it, I can change it from here. I can do the same thing with the Profinet device name. And you'll see under operations, you could even stop the PLC. You can put the PLC into run mode. If I click identify and I'm checkboxed on a bunch of these devices, it'll actually flash the lights to show me that, hey, I'm actually looking at the right device. Option to change the time that's set on it. Backup and restore functionality is obviously for your panels, but it's all here. So this is the Simatic automation tool. I just wanted to show it again one more time.
Actually, on that note, Corey, do you mind if I steal the screen from you?
Sure.
I think. All right, I'm going up to the desktop. And one thing that just came to mind was a program called ProNeta. ProNeta is completely free. It does a fraction of what the automation tool does, mostly with respect to networks. So if you have a network that uses Profinet IRT or a ring topology or something like that, ProNeta is very useful to have because it'll display your physical connections in your topology, and as well, I do believe it gives you the option to change IP addresses. Let's see, I can flash a device, so as in like blink the lights.
You should be able to change it, yeah.
Yeah, so I can set my IP address from here, as well as assign a Profinet name separately. So, it sort of depends, but I can't do any upload, download, that kind of stuff from ProNeta. But if you find yourself doing network troubleshooting, sometimes ProNeta is certainly a good one to have on your maintenance devices.
I have a question. This is Frank. When you change the IP address or any part of it, the gateway or whatever, do you have to cycle power on the device?
Not through these tools.
Oh.
If I were to say go into TIA portal, go online with the drive, go into its one.
Oh, wait, is that Pronetta just for the drives, not for the PLC?
Pronetta is also for the PLCs. It's just
okay.
I don't have any PLCs connected right now. You know, specifically for the drives, I could actually go into the parameter settings. Oh, what is it? 89. So extended parameters, right? So if I were to change the IP address from within the parameter section or through the IO, through the display panel, 89, 21, that kind of stuff. You know, I can manually set this through the parameterization, and doing it that way, I do have to do a power cycle in order for that to take effect. So, you know, it's not a clear cut yes or no. It sort of depends on the way you're doing it. But utilizing any of the tools we showed, you know, earlier in this, it doesn't require a power cycle for that change to take effect. Both the IP address and the Profinet name, if you're doing that change from the TIA portal online access tools or through Pronetta or through the automation tool, all of that takes effect essentially instantaneously. No power cycle required.
So if there was, if this was a PLC and there were like 2 Ethernet ports on that PLC, it would show both of them, and
that's correct. And it would differentiate between the 2 networks. And you know, it's really nice. Like I said, if you're using Profinet IRT, it requires a certain topology, and not everyone knows that. And if they go to replace a device and they swap those 2 plugs into the 2-port switch the wrong way around, it's never going to work, right? And so using Pronetta, it'll highlight, hey, this is it'll highlight those 2 ports in red and say this is not correct per the topology definition. And it's just a really easy way of seeing that in a free tool, right? TIA portal does all the same stuff. Obviously, that's a paid for licensed tool. So.
Oh, great. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And now, where can we get the Pronetta? Same thing, Siemens?
Yeah, Pronetta, you can just download from the Siemens support site. If you just search this in Google, Proneta, then you'll be able to find that download.
Oh, great. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Hey Terry, Ray Carter again. Just a quick one. So we're talking about Profinet and Ethernet. You know, most of us just assume that the Profinet is the same as the Ethernet. Is there a difference between the 2 protocols? And if so, do you guys have documentation highlighting the differences?
Yeah, you know, maybe Corey could speak to this a little better, but you know, roughly, Profinet and Ethernet are not exactly the same, and even certain Profinet ports, say, for example, on a 1515 PLC, right? That's a 1515-2. So if I just go offline here, I'm going to just add it into an empty device into my network real quick for you. All right. You know, the short of it is that has 2 NIC cards, so 2 separate IP addresses on the same device, right? And here, if you look, I'm going to zoom in a bit more. Right, this kind of spells it out. My interface 1 has 2 ports on it, They are the same IP address. It's just a 2-port switch. And this is my main machine level interface, right? So it's intended to be Profinet, and it's intended to have a whole lot of bandwidth. So it can support lots of Profinet nodes, IRT, isochronous real-time communications. This second port, interface 2, doesn't support IRT. It does support Profinet, but usually less nodes. So it's just less computational horsepower dedicated to that port. What it's typically intended for is plant level communications, to talk to, a SCADA system, or do some data back up to a higher level operating level. So while it can, function as a machine level network, it's not as powerful as of one. We also do sell separate communication cards that are Ethernet and not Profinet. But right, Corey?
Yes, that's correct. The key is, just because you have an Ethernet port, whether it could be any device, doesn't mean it necessarily supports Profinet. It has to be explicitly labeled as supporting Profinet. The difference, kind of like to work off of what Terry is saying, is you typically have your 7-layer stack, and if you're using standard Ethernet comms, you have to work through every one of those stacks to get your information sent to the correct place. With Profinet, it's using real-time comms, and it's only using 4 layers, I believe. I think it's 4. It goes from the physical to the data link layer, and then it skips right up to the presentation application layer. So it essentially gives you predeterministic, faster communication than standard Ethernet. And there's also a whole bunch of other functionality built into Profinet, like Profinet device names and device swapping, module swapping, which are things that are typically supported by Profinet, but not by Ethernet, not by just Ethernet. It would have to be a Profinet port. So there are certainly differences, and the key to remember is that just because you have an Ethernet port doesn't mean it necessarily supports Profinet.
Right.
Okay, so that brings to mind, I'm getting a little specific about job that we're quoting, but so basically, if I'm now going to have a system, Profinet system, then if I use a non-Siemens drive, then that drive also has to support Profinet, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Well, yes and no. The PLCs also support a number of other protocols, like Modbus TCP, for example. So if that drive talks Modbus TCP, then you can communicate using Modbus TCP on that same exact network that we're talking on Profinet. But, ideally, you'll save yourself a boatload of time by just getting the Profinet version of that drive. Just keep the other thing in mind is Rockwell calls their protocol Ethernet IP, which is extremely confusing because we're used to thinking of Ethernet as, the broader communication that we use for all of our computers and that kind of stuff, when technically that's TCP IP. So they're kind of mashing these two terms together, calling it their own, and it's adding a little bit of confusion. So if you're from the Rockwell world, hopefully you probably know that, but if you don't live in it every day or don't talk communications every day, you may see that and think it's interchangeable with the TCP IP that our computers use to get to Google or whatever. But they're actually different. Ethernet IP is very akin to Profinet in that it's intended to be a deterministic industrial protocol. So, sorry, a bit of a tangent there. Short answer is just go with Profinet. You'll save yourself a lot of time.
Okay, no, appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
So Terry, for our drives, our Ethernet drives are Profinet and Ethernet IP kind of combos, right? You can just pick which one or the other. I don't know if the Rockwell ones if their Ethernet drives are Profinet and or EIP, or if they're just EIP. I'm guessing it's just the latter, but I don't know that for sure.
I'm in the same boat as you. I don't know for sure. I don't think they support Profinet, at least on many of the devices anyway. So,
yeah. Most of the other manufacturers' drives, though, they do have a Profinet communication capability, I think, as an option.
Correct. All right.
So, double checking the comments here. It looks like everybody had good things to say. No questions here. You're very welcome. Always happy. Always happy to help people.
Hey guys, one other thing, a little bit earlier on, you talked about the price of the Siemens software for the PLC software. I mean, for the basic software, for the basic PLC, basic HMIs, I mean, you're looking at $400 or $500 per copy. So it's really not that expensive. You're right, when you go up to the full version of the portal software, you're looking at the $3,000 kind of dollar range, or maybe even a little bit more if you get a combo license. But the basic software for the basic PLC, basic HMI is only $400 or $500. So it's not that expensive to do that. And you can do the floating license thing with the software, right, where you could have the license on the server and then just transfer it from one to another. The only challenge there is if you take it, you got to put it back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that's that's part of the worry is, when you've got maintenance guys and they start working on something and then somebody else yells, "Hey, I need you right here, right now," and they don't get a chance to return that license to its spot. So obviously.
And Siemens, in my experience, Siemens will do a roll your own type of integrator kind of package thing. I've had several customers where we've done a buy one, get one, buy two, get two kind of thing. So if a company does want a bunch of copies of it, Siemens will work with us to kind of do that. They don't have a set integrator program for multiple copies or site license type of thing, but they will work with you if the business case makes sense. They'll work with us.
So Isaac Hayes asked, does this back up safety functions as well, Corey?
Yes, I believe you would need the safety password though as well. So if you had a safety PLC with safety code, there would be a separate password associated with your safety portion of the program, which would prompt you when uploading that. So for backup, there's no safety obviously with the panels, but with the controllers and the drives, then that's a different story. Yes.
Can you back them up without the password just to be able to reload to a new PLC if you need
to? Without the password, probably not.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, if you have something that's password protected, then you're kind of stuck in a weird situation. And I know a lot of people do, and their OEMs don't want to provide them with the original program. So it definitely gets a little fuzzy on what you should be doing. However, yes, whenever you're uploading from a PLC, if it unfortunately is password protected, whether it be the normal or the safety portion, safety almost always requires a password, whereas the original program, non-safety, you can either have it protected or not protected, so it's situational. But if it is, then yes, you do need the password, unfortunately.
Will that be backed up to the memory card as well, if of the password?
If the memory card is read protected, then I want to say yes. If you're asking if the safety portion is backed up to the memory card, then yes. So if you sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think the difference, Isaac, is when you're dealing with the memory card, there's no option to change anything, right? And that's what Siemens is mostly worried about, is if you're going into Portal, uploading the safety program, there's absolutely the opportunity for one to change the safety program and kind of ruin its effectiveness as a safety device. So, however, with the card, all you're doing is replacing old hardware with new hardware, as long as it's the same hardware revision. Then I think you're in the clear. So that's the card does contain the safety portion of the code and does back that up. So if you're using the card to back up a PLC, then I don't know a whole lot about executing that actually, but I know that the safety portion does reside on the card and will go with a restore. So
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
So just to address everybody, so this was a modern Siemens equipment maintenance and backup. The plan is for next month is to go over the older hardware and the older software platforms and explaining the differences. So just so you guys know, next month, it's like mid-August or something like that, we'll be going over S7300s and S7400s. The panels are relatively same in terms of what you should be doing for backing up and restoring. So for example, ProSave can be used for modern panels. It can be used for much older panels as well. I just didn't show that. I'll quickly pull it up just so you guys can get a taste of what I'm talking about. Let me pull this up. So I was automatically at the KTP 400 Comfort, but if you scroll up and down through it, you'll see you have the MP 377s, 277s, which are older panels programmed in either earlier versions of TI Portal or WinCC Flexible 2008. And then you have the OP panels, which are also older, earlier versions of TI Portal, WinCC Flexible 2008. It's touch panels, and then you'll see you have obviously your micro panels and basic panels. So ProSave can be used for modern or old panels, which is good because it kind of exists across generations. TI Portal, not necessarily. It depends on the version. So just so you all know, we will be going over the older hardware, which I think was something that you had mentioned, Isaac, in your email to me, just to make you aware that that is going to happen just in the near future. We wanted to make it easier so everybody could focus on the newer hardware now, and then we'll adjust our focus to the older stuff on the next one.
Yeah, we're looking at Thursday, August 13th for the older stuff. So we'll be sending out an invite for that as well.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thank you, Marie. Yeah, and sorry.
I have a question there. The ProNeta, can you use that? Well, like on the older PLC, like the Step 7 stuff?
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure you can. I'm almost positive you can, because ProNeta existed as a much older software as well, and it kind of evolved with, as Siemens moved forward with their new product lines. So if I opened up my old virtual machine from let's just running like Windows XP or whatever, I'm pretty sure there's a super old version of ProNeta that works for that. I have to test it out, but I'll address that in the next webinar as well as an example, using modern ProNeta with older hardware. And I'm almost positive it works. I have to double check though, and I'll address that as well with Simatic automation tool. So I'll take note of that.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah, there's a question about future webinar covering PLC programming. We will address that with the automation team and see what we can come up with.
Yeah, it's programming is a concept that we can talk about it in 30 to 45 minutes. It's just how much can we cover and how much is actually going to sit after a 30 to 45 minute discussion. Sure, there's things we can address that will make you a little bit more efficient with programming, but it does take time to go through explaining the correct way to program and showing examples. So that usually requires multiple hours, if not days. So just to keep note of that, we could do something real introductory that covers good programming concepts and good programming practice, maybe. I think that might be a good way to address it, but it's just a little bit harder because it is a more involved topic, a little bit more technical.
Hey, Marie.
Yeah, sure.
Hey, maybe a follow-up to this is if you want to send a link to that automation tasks in 10 minutes. They go through a whole bunch of just kind of like little quick snippets of how to do this, this, and this, and that might be something people might be interested in too.
Okay. Will do.
Yeah, that's a good point, Isaac. Absolutely. When you have people transitioning between the two worlds, I'm not super familiar with Allen Bradley, so I wouldn't know what the relation would be. However, even if the information we'd provide would be helpful for those that are just new to Portal or to Step 7, then that could be helpful for people that are new in general.
I'm just
Appreciate
thinking
that.
we have a number of maintenance people who are like, they know how to do some basic programming, and like they know what a, like the general programming blocks are. It's just, what does that look like in a Siemens thing? So I don't think wouldn't need to know it yourself. Just, oh, here's how you create a new ladder. Here's how you navigate. And that way you can kind of just hit the high level. This is,
Right.
the organization of Siemens.
Hey, Corey.
Right,
Corey,
like-
Steve Arnold would be good at that. He's done a couple of those AB to Step 7 classes before. I think he has a pretty good handle on just kind of big picture. They call it an N register. We call it this. They do it this way. This is how we do it. And he's done it. He's conducted a couple of those courses. So
Okay.
I don't know what's involved with the virtual way of doing that, but I know we used to get some demo cases in that had some AB and Siemens stuff side by side, with a wall between them so they wouldn't get sick from each other, I guess maybe. But
Hey, Isaac, how many people do you have that would be interested in that class?
I've got 3 guys specifically that
Okay.
would be interested in it. And like I said, as a former integrator who almost everything was Rockwell, and was one of the few guys who knew a little bit about Siemens. I was always trying to, like, the comfort level is the thing I was always fighting against, right? Because, like, I think Siemens has a great platform. There's a lot of things that they do fantastically well, but getting that comfort level in. So usually, I think most classes I haven't been able to get them to do it because it's like, oh, this is what a PLC is. This, like, it starts too low. It's like this. It feels like they feel like a waste of time. So something like, hey, this is, here's how you create a ladder. Here's how you do a network topology. Here's all these, like, the high level stuff just to hit it. If I can get familiarity up, and with people, I think in general that helps me a lot to make a case for, no, like, you already have some Siemens. Why would we, let's build on that platform instead of trying to switch out to something you're more familiar with.
and I believe that AB to Step 7 class does that. It's not entry level. It's assuming you know how to program PLCs, and it's this bigger picture thing, Isaac. So I think that AB to Step 7 class, and Marie, if where you're going is how many people do we need to be able to get those kits in and everything, it sounds like there might be enough, but it's exactly what he's looking for.
Yeah.
Well, and I took that class myself, and it was fantastic.
You did?
I just usually can't get them to pay for other people besides me as the engineer to go to those classes. And that's why I got a webinar that just hits the high points, like what I could pass around to some of my. I think it's going to be awesome. So.
Yeah, it's absolutely something we'll discuss. I get where you're coming from. It's, even if you know how to program it, the interface, the software itself is very different. So navigation can make people a little bit more weary about interfacing with the software. So I totally get where you're coming from. We'll talk about it and see what we come up with will fit as the best solution for the problem you're seeing. But I do understand what you're saying. So definitely take note of that.
I really appreciate what you guys have been doing with webinars. It's great. It's really helpful for me to get some more just good familiar level. I'm sure I can find this stuff just by clicking around, but seeing the experts do it makes me makes me feel a little less anxious when I'm doing some of this stuff. So that's awesome. Thank you guys.
Absolutely.
Happy to help.
Just real quick, I did a quick Google search on just Siemens AB to Step 7 class. And if you click on there's several videos, half-hour long videos that's just on some of that already. So there may be some other things that you can find even online in the interim that might be helpful.
Yeah, well, if anyone has any other questions before we finish up this webinar, then please let us know in the next minute or so. I'm going to pull up a slide here that has our contact information. So if you think of something in the meantime afterwards and you want to ask us, then you can reach out to us at these emails. Boom. Yeah, so there's my email and my phone number. There's Terry's email and phone number. Like I said, if anything comes up afterwards and you have a quick question for us, please feel free to contact us. It's what we're here to do. We're here to support our customers and any equipment that they purchase from us. So we're here as your resource, and please use us. Any other closing comments there, Terry?
Nope, that's it. It's a short class. There's a lot of stuff we can get into, and like Corey said, if you have any specifics, reach out to us, and we're happy to walk you through anything in particular.
Thanks, Corey and Terry. Great job.
Very welcome. Thank you all for attending. I'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you.